Then Imam al-Barbahari, rahimahullah, he follows that with a point that's numbered here as point number 99 on page 14. ومن قال لفظي بالقرآن مخلوق فهو جهمي ومن سكت فلم يقل مخلوق أو غير مخلوق فهو جهمي. وهكذا قال أحمد بن حنبل. وقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إنه من يعيش منكم بعدي فسيرى اختلافا كثيرا فإياكم ومحدثات الأمور فإنها ضلالة فعليكم بسنتي وسنة الخلفاء الراشدين المهديين وعضوا عليها بالنواجذ. The saying of Imam al-Barbahari rahimahullah, know that whoever says my recital of the Qur'an is created, then he is a Jahmi. And whoever remains silent and will neither say it is created nor it is not created, then he is a Jahmi. This was the saying of Ahmad ibn Hanbal. And the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, whoever amongst you lives long will see great controversy. So beware of newly introduced affairs, for they are misguidance. And adhere to my Sunnah and the Sunnah of the rightly guided orthodox caliphs, khulafa. Bite upon it with your molar teeth. Shaykh Fawzan, hafidhahullah, he said in explanation, obviously the last part of the text here is taken from the hadith that's come a number of times. Whoever lives long amongst you will see great difference. And the rest of the point taken from the hadith of Al-Irbad ibn Sariyah radiyallahu anhu, reported by Imam Ahmad, Abu Dawud, At-Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah, and declared authentic by Shaykh al-Albani. The famous hadith has come a number of times. As for the explanation of Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan, hafidhahullah, he said, Allah affirmed speech, al-kalam, for himself in many ayahs. From them is his saying, قل لو كان البحر مدادا لكلمات ربي لنفد البحر قبل أن تنفد كلمات ربي. Surah Al-Kahf, the 18th surah, ayah 109, with the explanation. Say, if the water of the ocean were ink to write down the words of my Lord, then the ocean would be exhausted before the words of my Lord were finished. Shaykh Fawzan said, meaning, the words of Allah with which He commands and forbids and manages the creation with. Who can then enumerate the words of Allah? He the Perfect and Most High. They could not be written down by the oceans, nor by all of the pens. And he said, and the speech of Allah, the kalam, the speech of Allah is, as is said by the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, Qadimun Naw' Hadithul Ahad. The speech of Allah the Most High is, as the people of the Sunnah and the Jama'ah say, with respect to its type, eternal. With respect to its individual instances, it newly comes about. And just to mention some clarification on that, it's not terribly easy to translate. Then the Qadimun Naw' means that Allah the Most High has always had the attribute of speech, always been able to speak, always had the attribute of speech. So that's the meaning of qadim and no. He's always had that attribute. Always. That attribute has eternally been with him, that attribute. We don't say that Allah the Most High gained that attribute at some time. He didn't have the attribute and then he gained that attribute. No. He's always had that attribute. However, with regard to individual instances, for example, Allah the Most High speaking to Adam, or Allah the Most High speaking to Musa alayhi salam, or Allah the Most High speaking to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, or speaking to Jibreel with the Qur'an, and these individual instances of the speech of Allah, they newly occur. They newly occur. So that's what Shaykh meant. So he said the speech of Allah, as is said by the as-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, is with respect to its type, eternal, and with respect to its individual instances, it newly comes about. So the Qur'an is from the newly occurring instances of the speech of Allah, and from the individual instances of the speech of Allah, the Perfect and Most High. So the speech of Allah is confirmed by the book and the Sunnah of His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and there is no doubt that sound intellect affirm speech for Allah, because it is sifatu kamal, it is an attribute of perfection, and negation of it is an attribute of deficiency. Having the attribute of speech, being able to speak, is an attribute of perfection, completion and perfection, and being unable to speak, not having the attribute of being able to speak, being unable to speak is an attribute of deficiency. The Shaykh said, however, the Jahmiyyah, and they are the followers of Jahm ibn Safwan, Jahm ibn Safwan, who was a foul person, who appeared amongst the people and tried to cause them to doubt about the religion of Allah. And he commanded them with apostasy and disbelief. And from that is that he tried to cause them to doubt about the fact that Allah speaks. And he said, the speech of Allah which is present is something created, makhluk. He created it in the preserved tablet, or he created it in Jibreel, or he created it in Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So it is therefore just an ascription of a created thing to its creator. For example, just like saying Baytullah, the house of Allah, or Naqatullah, the she-camel of Allah. That's the end of what he's quoting from Jahm. From the speech of Jahm is the Qur'an that we have with us, the speech of Allah that we have, the speech of Allah is just something created. Allah either created it in the preserved tablet, or he created it in Jibreel, or he created it in Muhammad. And then he explains, why is it therefore called the speech of Allah? It means it's ascribing a created thing to the creator of that thing. I mean, speech created by Allah. That's what the speech of Allah means with Jahm. He said, just the same as saying Baytullah, the house of Allah. I mean, the house created as a house created by Allah and given honor by Allah. And likewise the she-camel of Allah, a created thing, is she-camel that Allah has honoured. Jahmi is saying the same thing with regard to the Qur'an. When we say the Qur'an is the speech of Allah, same thing. A created thing being ascribed to its creator. Shaykh Fawzan said, this is what he said, may Allah disfigure him. He said, Allah does not speak, and the ascription of speech to him is just an ascription of a created thing to its creator. This is from his madhab, his position. And he also had the position of al-jabr with regard to qadr, with regard to pre-decree. Jahm held the position of jabr, that people are compelled to do their deeds. No free will, compelled. And he had a position with regard to negating, denying the names and attributes. And he also had a position with regard to denying the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and denying the Qur'an also. So he was a filthy apostate who appeared with the light of this falsehood. And this madhab, this way of Jahm, this madhab, was derived from the Jews, as was mentioned by Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah in the introduction to Al-Hamawiyyah. And Al-Jahm, he was not the one who began this madhab. Before him there was Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham. He is the one who initiated this repulsive saying, and he took it from Talut, the Jew, and Talut took it from Labid ibn al-Aqsam, the Jew who did sorcery upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this saying is derived from the Jews, those who distort the speech of Allah away from its correct meanings. So this foul madhab should not be considered something inexplicable when its source is known, that it is from the Jews. They infiltrated it amongst the Muslims by means of this foul man, Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham, the one who was killed by Khalid al-Qasri on the day of Eid al-Adha. As Ibn al-Qayyim mentioned, and he quotes three famous lines from the Nuniyah of Ibn al-Qayyim, his poem on Aqidah, each line ending in Nun. Concerning this event, that this man Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham, that he was killed by Khalid al-Qasri. So therefore Ibn al-Qayyim said, وَلِأَجْلِ ذَا ضَحَّى بِجَعْدٍ خَالِدُ الْقَصْرِيُّ يَوْمَ ذَبَائِحِ الْقُرْبَانِ إذ قال إبراهيم ليس خليله كلا ولا موسى الكليم الداني شكر الضحية كل صاحب سنة لله درك من أخي قرباني, which can be very roughly translated as, and on account of that Khalid al-Qasri slaughtered Ja'ad on the day of the sacrifice, since he said that Ibrahim was not Allah's chosen beloved one. No, and nor was Musa one whom he spoke to and drew close. So every person of Sunnah gives thanks for that sacrifice. What an excellent thing Allah has brought about through the sacrifice of this brother. And in explanation, they mention that this happened around the year 118 after the Hijrah in Kufa. Khalid al-Qasri, who was the governor in Iraq at that time, he slaughtered this evil person, Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham. Shaykh Fawzan said he took this, or rather this saying was taken from him by Al-Jahm ibn Safwan, and it became ascribed to him because he is the one who propagated it, but he is not the one who initiated it. Meaning this saying, which is famous as the position of the Jahmiyyah, obviously is ascribed to Jahm, because he is the one who spread this saying far and wide. He actually came from his teacher, Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham. Just before continuing, a side point that some of the people of knowledge mention is that this saying that we heard was taken from by Jahm from Al-Ja'ad, and he took it from Talut, and he took it from Labid. And this Labid ibn al-A'sam, he was a Jew, as we heard, who did sorcery from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this saying was taken from him by Talut, the Jew, and from him his student Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham. He took this saying of the Jahmiyyah, and from Al-Ja'ad it was taken by his student Al-Jahm ibn Safwan. And each was executed. We saw Al-Ja'ad was executed here, and likewise Al-Jahm ibn Safwan, he was killed as well, student. But before that, each time before the person was executed or killed, he had a famous student who took the saying from him. So Al-Jahm ibn Safwan, this saying was taken from him by Bishr al-Marisi, and then Bishr al-Marisi, he taught this to Ahmad ibn Abi Du'ad, the one who was at the head of those who tortured Imam Ahmad. And just briefly with regard to the event, again before we move on inshallah, this event that Khalid al-Qasri, he slaughtered Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham on the day of sacrifices. He gave a khutbah on the minbar, or rather he gave a khutbah to the people of the Eid, and he said, may Allah accept your sacrifices, for indeed I am going to sacrifice Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham. And he came down and he slaughtered Al-Ja'ad ibn Dirham. Then Shaykh Fawzan said, with regard to this report, there's some speech from the scholars, is it established or not? It's reported by a number of the scholars in their books, such as Ad-Darimi in Ar-Radd al-Jahmiyyah, and Al-Bukhari in his book Khalq Af'al al-Ibad, and other books as well. So Shaykh al-Albani in Mukhtasar al-Ulu, Al-Zahabi's book Al-Ulu, the abridgment of it, Shaykh al-Albani comments, and he mentions that the first chain of narration for this, that there's weakness in it, there are unknown people in the chain. But then he said, however, the narration that comes after it, there's another narration with a different chain, is better than it, and perhaps therefore that is why the scholars state that this story definitely happened. I mean, there's more than one chain of narration for it. Back to what Shaykh Fawzan said, Hafidhullah, he said, so he mentioned the lines of poetry from the Nuniyya, then he said, as we heard, this saying was taken from him, from Ja'ad, by Al-Jahm ibn Safwan, and it was ascribed to him because he was the one who propagated it, but he was not the one who initiated it. Then Shaykh Fawzan said, and the people of the Sunnah rebuked and criticized them severely in Jahmiyyah, and they spoke sternly in that regard. And this will follow, insha'Allah, in the part that comes after. However, with us now, we have a part of this foul madhab, which is negation of speech for Allah. Denial that Allah speaks. Then the Shaykh made the point, however, a problem arose with the people of the Sunnah, which is, should it be said, I mean, having dealt with that position there, that the saying of Jahmiyyah that Allah does not speak, and the scholars sternly refuted that saying. Indeed, we affirm that Allah speaks, and the Qur'an is His speech. That was refuted clearly. Then he said, however, a problem arose with the people of the Sunnah. Should it be said that my recital of the Qur'an, I mean a person, should he say my recital of the Qur'an, because this is an issue they brought up. So then what is the response to it? So he said, should it be said my recital of the Qur'an is created or is not created? The Shaykh said this is something which they introduced also amongst the Muslims. And when they failed with the first saying, then they tried this second approach here now. Brought up this saying. What about a person when he recites the Qur'an? What's that recital? Is it created or not then, his recital? The Shaykh said they introduced this amongst the Muslims also. So should you say my recital of the Qur'an is created? Or should you say, my recital of the Qur'an is not created? Or should you tatawaqqaf, should you withhold and say, if what is meant, if what you mean is what is recited, that which is recited, then it is the speech of Allah. It is not created. And if what is meant is the person's own particular recital of the Qur'an, then his own recital is a created thing, and his voice is created. His own style of recital and his own particular voice is something created. So therefore it must be mentioned with detail. Answer must be given then with detail. And this is the detail which was stated by Imam Ahmad and Al-Bukhari and a group of the verifiers. The Shaykh is making an important point here. He's not, the scholars were upon this one saying here, mentioning with detail. He said, so do not say, my recital of the Qur'an is created, unrestrictedly. And do not say, it's not created, unrestrictedly. And do not withhold. Don't say, I'm not going to say this, I'm not going to say that. Rather, mention the answer with detail. In other words, the answer again, just repeat it, what the Shaykh gave, that the answer should be given if the question is written, the question was introduced amongst the people, therefore it required an answer. So the correct answer is to mention detail. It is that a person, if somebody says, your recitation of the Qur'an, created or not, then, as the Shaykh said, it should be stated with detail that if what you mean is what I'm reciting, then that is the speech of Allah. That is not created. Or if what you mean with what is meant is the person's own particular recitation, his own particular voice, then that is created. That is the detail. Before moving on to the next part, then with regard to the explanation of Shaykh Ahmad al-Najmi rahimahullah, then he said, after mentioning a number of evidences from the Qur'an affirming that the Qur'an is indeed the speech of Allah, not created, he then said, and whoever, and he mentioned that indeed the speech of Allah, the Qur'an is from the speech of Allah, and the speech of Allah is an attribute of His. Then he said, and whoever says that anything from the attributes of Allah is a created thing, then he is a kafir, he is a disbeliever. This is what the as-Sunnah wal Jama'ah have affirmed. And al-Lalikai, what he's referring to here is Imam al-Lalikai in his book Sharh i'tiqad as-Sunnah, famous book of Aqidah. He said al-Lalikai mentioned from 550 scholars from the Salaf that they said, whoever says that the Qur'an is a created thing, then he is a kafir, he is a disbeliever. And whoever says that his recitation of the Qur'an is something created, then he is an innovator, a Jahmi, he is astray. And likewise one who remains silent and doesn't say whether it's created or not created, he is also a Jahmi, astray. Shaykh said, so what Allah has informed is very clear, that the Qur'an is the speech of Allah. And whoever will not say that, then he has belied Allah in what he has informed of.